What is going on, everybody? Thank you guys so much for joining me, and welcome back to my series where I give you guys my NHL 2021-2022 season prediction. And with this being the final team in the Metropolitan division, this will wrap up my series on these NHL teams, the very last team that I have yet to cover, and that is the Washington Capitals. And just like I do at the end of my coverages of every single division, once I give you a rundown of where I feel the Capitals stand, I'm going to give you a quick little standings recap on where I feel the rest of the Metropolitan division will shape out, and then I have a little bit of a surprise after that. So in terms of the Capitals, I mean, we all know it's a very elite team. They have been for the past decade, and we all know that at least in the regular season, they are among the top teams in the NHL. Now, this was always a team that struggled to get anything done in the playoffs. However, in 2018, they were able to win their first, and up to this date, their only Stanley Cup Championship. But ever since then, they have been a consistent first-round exit, and this past season was no different. So taking a look at what they did last year, they had a 36-15-5 record, which was a 77-point team, second in the East Division on a 113-point pace, over 82 games, very solid regular season as expected. However, they did lose in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, dropping that series to the Boston Bruins in just 5 games. Taking a look at their offensive stats, as expected, among the best in the league, a 3.36 goals for per game, top 5 in the NHL, and a lethal power play, as always, 24.8%, third in the NHL. Taking a look at their defensive stats, a 2.88 goals against per game, which was 17th in the league, and an 84% penalty kill percentage, which was 5th. So based on what they did last season, it was a little bit of a struggle in terms of their goaltending. It was a little bit of a weakness. You know, right now it's more so below average, but still relatively inexperienced. But, you know, their amazing offense and their special teams always keeps them afloat, and that's why they are a very successful regular season team. So taking a look at their top 5 scorers from last season, their leading scorer being Nicholas Backstrom, who in 55 games had 15 goals and 38 assists for 53 points. One of the most underrated players of all time, honestly. He's just one of the best playmakers that's ever played, especially being the guy that's set up the majority of Alex Ovechkin's goals. He's just a tremendous number 1 center and has been for the course of the past decade plus. In second, we got the offensive defenseman John Carlson, who in 52 games, a very solid 10 goals and 34 assists for 44 points. Another guy who's really, elevated his offensive play over the course of the last few seasons. Of course, being the guy on that Capitals team leading the blue line and scoring, just a very pivotal piece to that Capitals team. Third, we got TJ Oshie, who in 53 games had 22 goals and 21 assists for 43 points. Just a perfect top 6 complementary piece. Year in and year out, you just know exactly what he's going to give you. A guy who's a perennial 20-plus goal scorer, has hit 30 a couple of times as well. Just very solid winger all around. Fourth, we got Alex Ovechkin, who in only 45 games, 24 goals, which managed to lead the team, and 18 assists for 42 points. So for Ovechkin, obviously still one of the greatest goal scorers, might be the greatest goal scorer of all time. That is arguable. Maybe you can say like the best pure goal scorer ever. Now, I don't know if he's going to pass Wayne Gretzky, but he definitely has a legitimate chance, so long that he doesn't take any significant steps back. Then in fifth, we have Tom Wilson, who in 47 games had 13 goals and 20 assists for 33 points. Just another great complementary piece in that top 6. I mean, ever since he was put in that role, he's really thrived in taking his offensive game to another level, but he provides that grit and that toughness that the Capitals desperately could use, and especially him playing with Alex Ovechkin, that is a very difficult line to play against. In terms of the goaltending for this team, I would say it was a little bit more inconsistent. I mean, Samsonov did have some struggles staying healthy, and when he was in the lineup, wasn't particularly good. So Vitek Vanacek really had to step in as that starter. 37 games, a winning record, 21-10-4, because the Capitals are a very elite offensive team. However, his statistics in terms of his goals against and his save percentage, more so on the mediocre side, a 2.69 goals against average and a 908 save percentage. So yes, this is a very inexperienced goaltending tandem, but they're still young, so you'd have to think that they're only going to get better, right? So, and as long as that offense continues to show up, this still is likely a very good team. Entering this season, I feel like expectations might be a little bit lower. I think some people might assume that this team, they're kind of getting out of their primes now, and the core is going to start to decline because it is a little bit older. However, as of right now, they're still a very solid offensive team. In terms of what they do in the playoffs is going to be the question mark, but this still looks like a relatively solid regular season team. If you look at their offseason, they didn't really do anything, and it didn't really convince me like that they could stretch their window open just a little bit longer. However, they still have good pieces, but regardless, they didn't add anybody significant. And the key loss they have was Brendan Dillon, who is a very solid top 4 defenseman. So that could be definitely a huge loss on that blue line. So yeah, that is a little bit concerning for me because considering, how things ended, I still feel like they could use more experience in goal, especially if Vanacek and Samsonov don't quite pan out this season once again. And on defense, they could have added another top 4 to replace Dillon, but obviously they failed to do so. That's why I have him as a playoff hopeful, because there is some concern about the core and just the team all around him that they could be on decline. However, I assume that they're still going to be a very good regular season team. They're notorious for having great regular season success, and as long as that offense is still clicking on all cylinders, I think they should be just fine. So taking a look at my top 5 scorers for the Capitals this upcoming season, I'm going to go with a 2-way tie for first place. Obviously, Alex Ovechkin going to lead the team in goals. 46 goals I have him scoring with 26 assists for 72 points. He's the grade 8, right? He's still a top goal scorer in this league. Even though he is getting a little bit older, he has shown literally no signs of declining at all. So I feel like he should definitely push for 50 goals again and roughly 70 plus points if he's fully healthy. Now, I will say I don't think he'll ever score 50 goals again. I think we're kind of past that point, especially him being 35, 36. Maybe that's where we start to see a slight decline. However, I still feel like he's going to be among the league leaders in goals, most certainly top 5. And I'm also going to go with Nicholas Backstrom here to have 20 goals and 52 assists for 72 points. He's a little bit younger, so I still feel like he has some prime years left in him. And he is still a very solid asset. He will be playmaking as usual, very solid with the puck and feeding his teammates, consistent throughout his whole career, about a 20 goal pace, usually scores about 20 goals a season and 70 points. That is very respectable, definitely achievable without question. Third, I'm going with John Carlson leading the defense in scoring once again, 15 goals, 55 assists for 70 points. Still is an elite offensive blue liner, likely will be for the next few years now. Being on a top power play unit as well, setting up Ovi, it means he's going to pile up them apples, Very possibly he will have another 70 plus point season. He was the leading scorer a couple years ago, so he definitely has that offense in him. So in fourth, I'm going to go with Evgeny Kuznetsov to score 23 goals and 42 assists for 65 points. Kuznetsov to me is a total wild card, just coming off not the greatest year last season. I don't feel like he is that bad, but I'm also unsure if he can get back to that point per game center that he was a few years back. So I'll be setting my expectations kind of in between here. He probably will score roughly 60, 65 points. Maybe he can challenge for 70. Don't want to set it too high just based on the rough year he had last season. I'm not sure how well he bounces back, to be honest. But I still feel like he has all the offensive talent in the world, and he has a great team around him that will elevate his play for sure. But I really do think he's an X factor here, and his chemistry, how he molds with the rest of the Capitals coming back now, that could make or break this season, especially him, kind of getting into trouble, being a lot of trade rumors. We'll see how well he plays this year. Fifth, I'm going TJ Oshie here, 26 goals, 27 assists for 53 points. Oshie, we all know this is what he should do. He's been this consistent guy throughout the course of his career. 25 plus goals, about 50 plus points. That is exactly what we're going to expect from him. That is a given that he's going to produce that. If he's healthy, that is exactly what he will do. So now I'm going to give you guys my season expectations on where I feel the Capitals will be for this upcoming season. So like I said, I can definitely see the argument why people might feel this team is on the decline, and especially in a tough Metropolitan division, people could make the case as to why this team could fall out of a playoff spot. However, like Pittsburgh, I feel like Pittsburgh and Washington are in the same boat. They're very similar, teams on paper. Both of those teams, their playoff success is definitely in question, but in terms of what you expect from them in the regular season, I don't think it's a question mark. I still think with the talent they have on paper, they should definitely make the playoffs. So with that, I have them second in the Metropolitan Division with a 49, 27, and 6 record for a total of 104 points, and I'm still going to pick them to make the playoffs. Until I see any sort of decline in the regular season, I can't just assume that it's going to happen this year. I'm just not sure that it will. I still like all the pieces they have, especially up front. Yes, the goaltending could be inconsistent. The defense could be a little bit better, but this team just has the formula to play really well in the regular season, and I don't see much of that changing. All right, so now, like I mentioned, I'm going to give you guys a brief recap on where I feel the Metropolitan Division standings will play out for this upcoming season. So in first, I got the Carolina Hurricanes finishing with 106 points, just barely edging out the Capitals for that division. To me, the Hurricanes, despite all the weird offseason moves they made, I still feel like they're the most complete team in this division on paper, at least. I think they're one of the deepest offensive teams in the league. Defensively, despite the departure of Dougie Hamilton, I still feel like they're a very sound defensive team. And in goal, I still feel like they have a solid tandem, even though, it was really overshadowed with the Nedeljkovic deal. I still don't get that. But Frederik Andersen, definitely capable of bouncing back, as well as Antti Ranta. Not a bad tandem for me. In second, like I said, the Washington Capitals, I have finishing with 104 points. I just can't really bet against this team, honestly. They're still a very solid team on paper. They have one of the better offenses in the league. Their top six is among the best in the entire NHL. Might even be the best top six in the league, if I'm being totally honest. And I'm not just going to assume they decline, although I am a little bit skeptical about their goaltending tandem, although it's pretty young, and their defense, I'm not entirely sold on that. I still feel like they have the formula to do relatively well in the regular season. And in third, it's more of the same story, the Pittsburgh Penguins with 99 points. Another team like Washington, they have the formula for the regular season, one of the better offensive teams. Yes, Christian Jarry had a rough stretch there, especially in the playoffs, but I still feel like he's going to be a very solid starting goaltender. He's only like 25, 26. I think you just need to give him a little bit more time. But obviously the Penguins are in a win now mode because their decor is kind of getting older and, maybe they're in a decline as well. But like I said, for the Capitals, until I see it happen, I have no reason to believe that they would, decline and fall out of the playoff spot as a result. In fourth place, for that first wild card in the Eastern Conference, I'm going with the New York Islanders to finish with 97 points. I mean, we know what we get from the Islanders. They're a legitimate contender in terms of, how amazing they are all around. Deep team offensively, even though they don't have a legitimate, superstar scorer. And on defense, they shut your ass down like they do every season. Very solid goaltending tandem based on the defensive system that Barry Trotz has in play. This team should probably make the playoffs. They're probably not going to be a dominant regular season team, but I definitely think they have enough to make the playoffs. And of course, when they make the playoffs, you got to look out for them, right? And fifth, I got the New York Rangers winning that second wild card position there, 96 points for them. I just have great feelings about the Rangers. I think they're going to take the next step. I mean, they're only getting better as the years go on. I mean, they were very close to a playoff spot. They were in a very tough division last year. Now, this division is very tough as well, so that could be another, cause of concern for the Rangers as to why they barely missed the playoffs this season. But I think they're going to take that step, make the playoffs. With the lethal offense they have, Adam Fox leading that blue line, Shesterkin and Georgiev, very solid tandem, only going to get better. And of course, Gerard Gallant behind the bench, I think is a underrated and huge addition to that Rangers team that needs that experience behind the bench. And in sixth, I got the Philadelphia Flyers. Unfortunately, I kind of have them having a similar season to last season, only finishing with 88 points and not making the playoffs. Now, based on how well the Flyers do, it's going to come down to their goaltending. If Carter Hart can have a massive bounce back season, then this Flyers team probably should make the playoffs. But overall, I'm not exactly sure where this team is all around. I don't necessarily have full confidence in their improvements on defense. Ristolainen and Yandel, to me, I don't feel like they're going to fit well. I just feel like they needed more help getting better defensively, this Flyers team. And I just don't think they necessarily provide that stability defensively. Although Yandel is still very decent offensive defenseman, and Ristolainen, maybe he bounces back in Philly, but just those guys on the defensive end, I'm just a little bit iffy on, and especially a team that was not very good defensively. If you're going to leave Carter Hart out to dry again, even if he plays better, he's just average. It's going to be very tough to make the Metropolitan Division playoff bracket. It's just, I don't know. And Martin Jones in backup as well. It's very shaky. It's very iffy. Considering what happened last season, there is reasons for me to believe why this team might not necessarily bounce back. Although I am very confident in their forward group. I think they have a very solid forward group. And Brian Ellis, I think, is the one addition on that blue line that I definitely think is going to help them all around. So I can definitely see them being in the race. I can definitely see them even making the playoffs. But again, it's going to come down to how well the goaltending plays out. But for me, I'm just going to say they don't make the playoffs. And maybe it's a bold take because, they have that pattern every other season where they miss the playoffs, then they make the playoffs. It's kind of like that thing. And last year they missed. So, logically speaking, you would say, oh, they're probably going to make the playoffs. So I guess I'm just going to go bold and say they missed a second year in a row. It's no disrespect to the Flyers. I definitely think they could make the playoffs. It's just there's a lot of really good teams in this division. So obviously there's some teams that, a lot of people won't agree with me missing, but that was going to go down for no matter who I picked missing the playoffs. But for me, I think it's going to be the Flyers, but obviously they can definitely prove me wrong. 7th, I'm going with the New Jersey Devils to have a much better season, but still not quite good enough to make the playoffs. I have them finishing with 79 points. Devils are a great up-and-coming team. They made a ton of key improvements. I like what they did on the blue line there, adding Dougie Hamilton. Definitely going to, spark their offense. Ryan Graves is going to help their all-around game as well. Jack Hughes is a huge X factor. If he takes another step and leads that Devils offense, they're definitely going to be a much more competitive team. And of course, look for Mackenzie Blackwood to have a bounce back season, especially with Jonathan Bernier backing him up. Pretty decent goaltending tandem right now. But for me, it's the tough division they're in. I just feel like they're still relatively young and inexperienced, and I don't think they're going to be a playoff team in that tough Metro division. And last, I got the Columbus Blue Jackets with a total of 73 points. A team that kind of had a bit of an overhaul in the offseason. They're kind of making me feel like they're probably entering a bit of a retool rebuild. Although I still feel like they have decent pieces. Max Domi could bounce back. Patrick Laine, of course, we all know he's capable of way more than what he did last season. Still feel like the goaltending tandem is decent. Mers Lincoln is a very solid goaltender. Korpisalo, I definitely think there's a bounce back potential there. Defensively, Zach Werenski, I still think is a solid piece. Adam Boqvist, who they acquired, still think he has a bright future in this league. I don't think they're going to be as bad as some people might think just based on, the offseason moves they made. I think people might be blowing that out of proportion, like losing Seth Jones and Atkinson. People like, oh, now this team's on a rebuild. They're going to be absolute dog water. I don't think they're that bad. I still feel like they have a decent team on paper. So there's definitely reason for me to believe that they can compete. However, I still have them last in the Metro Division. Like I did at the end of my Western Conference previews, just giving you guys a quick recap. This is my Eastern Conference standings as a whole with my Atlantic Division and my Metropolitan Division both combined. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all this right now. I kind of did a video on every single team. So if you're interested on my in-depth analysis on each team, please go check those videos out. But I'll just leave this up here so you guys can take a look and dissect what my mindset is for this Eastern Conference moving forward. But yeah, I'm just going to move on. So to end off this series, now that I've covered every single team, I'm going to give you guys some predictions on who I feel is going to win the Stanley Cup. Obviously, it's definitely way too early to predict like Cup champions or like, playoff brackets. I'm not doing a playoff bracket, but I'm going to give you guys my Western Conference champ, my Eastern Conference champ, and then my Stanley Cup champ at the end of it. This is just for fun. Obviously, it's too early for this, but I wanted to do it anyway. So for my Western Conference champions, I'm not going to go consensus here because I feel like for most people, the two front runners to win the West and be those two legitimate Stanley Cup contenders would be the Colorado Avalanche or the Vegas Golden Knights. But just for fun, I'm going to make a case for another team. And you know what? I'm going to go bold with both these predictions here. So I'm going to give you guys a hot take on who I feel is going to come out of the West this season. All right. So yes, I am going to make the case for the Winnipeg Jets and why I feel they are the team to come out of the West this season. Honestly, I think this is a very underrated team. I mean, you look at the team on paper, already it's not that bad. I mean, they have Connor Hellebuyck to begin with. You need a stud in net to take a team throughout an entire playoff run. I think Connor Hellebuyck, who is unquestionably a top 5, maybe top 3 goaltender in the NHL, definitely has it in him to lead this Jets team all the way to a Stanley Cup Finals. When you take a look at that forward group, it's among the deepest in the NHL. Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, Kyle Connor to complete that top line. Just an amazing top line. You got Nikolai Ehlers, Paul Stastny, pretty solid as well. Pierre-Luc Dubois, looking for a bounce back for him, but he's a very solid second line center. I think he will be pretty solid for this team. Even when you look at their offensive depth, I mean, Andrew Kopp is playing on your third line. He had a very solid season. And then there's also Adam Lowry, who I think is a very good third line center. Like, there is a ton of offensive depth on this Jets team. But what really convinces me why this Jets team could actually come out of the West is their improvements they made on defense. I mean, their defense was their glaring weakness for the past couple of years. But, those additions of Nate Schmidt from Vancouver, who I think can definitely bounce back, as well as Brendan Dillon from Washington, I still think that is going to make them a much better defensive team. I really like the defense they have on paper now. The top 4 now, they got Neil Pionk with Brendan Dillon, Josh Morrissey, and Nate Schmidt. And then you got Dylan DeMello, who's very solid playing on your third pair. Honestly, that is a much improved defense, and I think this team is much more complete than it was last season. Maybe this is a bold take, but I didn't want to be consensus here. I kind of wanted to spice things up a little bit. And if there's another team other than Vegas and Colorado that I could see coming out of the West, I think it's the Winnipeg Jets. Now, as for who I thought would come out of the East, was a little bit tougher to decide. For me, for the East, I kind of went a little bit off the board here. I mean, I think the only real one that would be the consensus would be the Tampa Bay Lightning to go back to the Stanley Cup Finals. Just the team they have is completely stacked. And of course, Vasilevsky being one of the best goaltenders in the league. He's probably the best goaltender in the league, in my opinion, honestly. Obviously, goaltending is a huge factor in a team going all the way to a Stanley Cup. And apart from what Tampa has with Vasilevsky, there's not a ton of other teams in that East where I'm totally confident in their goaltending situation right now. I mean, there are some teams with solid goaltenders. Like you look at Boston, I feel like Allmark and Swayman is a very solid goaltending tandem. You know, the Islanders obviously being another one, Varlamov, Sorokin, but they have a very great defensive system. So that's another team I can throw out there as possibly coming out of the East. But for this one, I'm going to go a little bit wild here. I don't know if people are expecting this team to do anything come playoff time, but I'm just going to throw them out here. So yeah, I'm just going to say Pittsburgh gets back to the finals. I know that might be a little bit crazy considering, you know, the drop off they had in playoffs the past couple of years, but I feel like there's maybe one more run left in this Penguins team, of course, led by Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang. Even with all the injuries that the Penguins deal with, like on a yearly basis, it seems, they always seem to like push through that adversity. And I just feel like they still have a solid team and definitely have a chance to go far in the playoffs. I'm not concerned about their offense. I feel like their defense isn't that bad either. You know, Chris Letang, Brian Dumoulin, they have some very solid pieces on the blue line. Goaltending is the question mark because that last series against the Islanders last year, I mean, Jari really cost them that series, but I definitely feel like he's still very young and I expect a bounce back season from him. And if he could just, you know, elevate his game a little bit, I feel like he can really be a solid piece to carry that Penguins team to a Stanley Cup Finals. Now, I think that's an even bolder take, honestly. I definitely think Winnipeg making the finals is more likely than Pittsburgh. But at the same time, the East has a ton of like kind of uncertainty outside of Tampa Bay, in my opinion. So I definitely think there's one wild team that can just make it to the finals, and I'm just going to say it's Pittsburgh. All right, so who do I see in this finals matchup to win the Stanley Cup? From this point on, I'm just going to go with who I think probably has the better team all around and who I think would have the better chance of winning the cup between these two opponents. So here it is. Yep. All right. So I'm saying Winnipeg's going to win the cup. I can definitely see it happening. I'll be totally honest. I know they're going to be tough in that Central Division, and it might be tough for them to even come out of the first round if they have to face a really solid team like Minnesota, St. Louis, maybe Colorado if they get pushed down to a wild card, and also Vegas in the Pacific Division. You know, there is some pretty solid Western Conference opponents. However, I definitely could see the Jets doing something. I like their goaltending. I think their goaltending is better than Pittsburgh's. Defensively, I think it's improved, and you could probably give them the slight edge. And then on offense, much deeper offensive team. So I think there definitely is a case to be made that this Jets team could actually underratedly make some noise. Now, this might seem a little bit crazy, but I kind of want to see a change up. Like, I know all the consensus is Tampa Bay, Vegas, or Colorado as like two of those three teams probably going to be in the finals to represent the West and East respectively. But, you know, I kind of want to do something different, and hopefully we can see something different like this, Winnipeg and Pittsburgh in the finals. I would definitely much rather see something like that, you know, two opponents that you probably didn't expect. But anyway, that is going to wrap up my video here on the Washington Capitals, and I guess wrapping up my Stanley Cup predictions and who I feel is going to win the cup next season. And with that, that wraps up my season previews for every single NHL team. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think about the Capitals, first of all. Do you agree? Do you think they're still going to be a very solid regular season and should probably make the playoffs? Or do you believe there is a legitimate chance that they go on a decline here and they fall out of the playoffs, you know, just being a team where the core is too old and they no longer can keep up with the rest of that now much tougher Metropolitan Division? Feel free to let me know in the comment section about the Capitals or anything else you've seen, what I've dissected in this video. Click like if you like this video, consider subscribing to the channel, and I will talk to you in the next one. I'll see you guys later.